there was a sibling rivalry, all right? And I could just kind of picture Jacob like, oh, this smells so good. And his brothers coming in from being gone probably days hunting because he is starving. And Jacob like, oh, this is so good. Like, has your kids ever done that? Like, eat a candy bar in front of their sibling? Like, ooh, look what I got. Ha ha. You don't have one. Or I have 3. You have 2. Ha ha. Like, that's why I kind of picture Jacob like, oh, this is so good. And Esau's like, I'm starving. Would you give me some? I don't know if I want to share with you, but this is so good. And eating it in front of him, smelling like the smell of the soup was just filled the tent. Esau's like, listen, like, I'm starving. I need some food. Will you give me some food? Jacob's like, you know what? I'll give you some food, but you're going to have to give me something for it. Like you're going to have to give me something for the food. I want your birthright. Can you imagine? I want your birthright. And you know how hungry Esau was? He was so hungry, he's like, okay, I'll give you my birthright. Now, I don't know what it's like in your family, parents, but talk about trunk or treat. Our kids would always come home, after Halloween, after trunk or treat at the church, and dump their candy out, and then the trading began, right? Because obviously they didn't like everything they got, so they're like trading, and they're like, and my oldest daughter, especially a couple years ago when Ivy was only 6, 7, 8, like would really take advantage of her and be like, here, I'll give you this 1, you give me those 4. And Ivy would be like, I don't know. And Addie would talk her into it. She's older and smart and witty. And, poor Ivy would be like, oh, okay. And like it was a completely an unfair trade. So a couple times, mom and dad have to step in and say, okay, Addie, that's enough. Stop taking advantage of your younger sister. And this is what happened here is Jacob was taking advantage, except it wasn't his younger sister. He was taking advantage of his older brother. But mom and dad didn't step in. And so Esau sells his birthright, essentially trades it for a bowl of soup. Now, a birthright, to me and you, would be like, well, okay, birthright. Really, in this day and age, what does that mean? Well, not much, maybe, but back in those days, it meant a lot. See, the birthright was an honor given to the firstborn. And it was the head of the household. That firstborn male was the head of the house. And it was the status that they inherited their father's estate. So the son had that birthright and would receive a double portion of whatever was passed down. Now, if you're the oldest, you're like, man, I wish we lived back then. Like, I like those, I like how they did things like that. That sounds pretty good. Now, if you're the middle or you're, a younger sibling, you're like, oh, that's unfair, right? And so it just depends on where you fall in the birth order of how you view this. But that's how it was then, that the oldest, the birthright, received a double portion of the inheritance that was going to be given. So it was a big deal for Esau. So it just tells us how hungry Esau must have been to trade him his birthright. Well, then we read in Genesis chapter 26, where Jacob, he not only takes his brother's birthright, but his father Isaac is getting an old age, and it's time for Jacob to give a blessing to his sons. Now, blessing was, different than the birthright. A blessing was, given regardless of the birthright, and the greater blessing was typically given to the one who did hold the birthright. But a blessing could go out to all of the children. But what happened was the father, Isaac, he was getting blind, couldn't really see. And so he decides it's time to hand out the blessings to I'm only got, I don't know how much longer I have. Well, the Bible tells us that Esau, the oldest, who should receive the bigger blessing, was a hairy man. Like it literally says, he was a hairy man. And so Jacob, he decides the birthright isn't enough, I want the blessing too. So he decides he's going to go in and steal his brother's blessing. So his father, he's half blind, and he goes and he takes some goat skin, ties it to his arm, because he knows this is how my father's going to know if it's Jacob or Esau, because Esau was really hairy. So he takes some goat skin and he ties it to his arm. So when he goes into the tent, Isaac's like, is this really you, Esau? And he's like, yeah, see here, feel my arm. He feels his arm. It's like nice and hairy. And he's like, oh, okay. And he proceeds to give Jacob the firstborn blessing, thinking it was Esau, but it was Jacob. And so, the birthright wasn't enough. Jacob also stole, tricked, and got the blessing as well.